Hey, friend, I have a real treat for you today. My guest is someone whose name you may or may not recognize. If you're a health and fitness coach, and I know you're out there listening, you will recognize it. Pete McCall will be my guest today on this podcast. He's been a spokesperson for the American Council on Exercise, to name one. And that's probably where you, if you're not a health coach, not in the fitness industry, but definitely interested in fitness, may have recognized the name. Regardless, you're in for a treat. And I recognize how fortunate we are to have him with us. We're talking about your favorite topic. His new book is called Ageless Intensity. So, we're talking about the intensity in exercise and the difference it makes in aging better, as opposed to oxidation and acceleration of aging that can happen when you're doing the wrong kind of exercise, specifically more of it and more of that endurance kind of thing you learned in the 70s and the 80s. So, what I'd like to do is have you geared up, ready to go, thinking about your own workout right now. How intense are your workouts? How well do you truly reach muscular fatigue and lift as heavy as you personally safely can, given the body that you're driving right now and the joints and the ligaments and the history that you have, any special conditions you have? Are you doing the best you can in the moment you're in while you're in those last few reps of a set? We're doing those intervals. Food for thought. Here we go. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles and concerns and really hopefully motivate you and inspire you to flip 50, your second half, with the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve. It's here that we cover what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset, because you are changing the way the world ages. We're going to dive right into this episode. Here we go. My guest today is Pete McCall. He's a certified personal trainer and the host of All About Fitness podcast, author of Ageless Intensity and Smarter Workouts, as well as several articles, textbook chapters, and blogs for various fitness organizations. In addition, Pete holds a master's in exercise science and has been educating fitness professionals since 2002. Currently, Pete lives in Carlsbad, California, where he's a global master trainer for core health and fitness. And the way that you're going to recognize what that means is probably if I say StairMaster, Nautilus, you'll recognize those names. Core is the big arch umbrella. And he is also a content contributor to the American Council on Exercise and National Academy of Sports Medicine. And I have to tell you, many of my guests write their own bio, and Pete did his, and he probably cut himself short. So we could go on for a lot longer time. Pete, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Deborah, for having me. And the bio is oftentimes the hardest thing to write. Is you want to let people, but the thing is, like in fitness, right, and especially with our audience of trying to communicate with people who are a little bit older and may not be on social media, is we were just talking about this before we hit recording. You and I have been doing this since before social media became online. So we did it a different way. So I've been in the background. I don't have 400,000 followers on Instagram. I don't have yet a big YouTube channel. So I've been doing it the old fashioned way. Is I've been going and communicating, working directly with personal trainers. And now I'm looking to figure out how I can communicate directly to people our age, those people 40, 45, 50 and up who just enjoy exercise and enjoy being active.
Yeah, love it. And I think this is one of the smartest things that we can do, and one of the best ways to leave a legacy and love what we do, which we also were talking about. I probably asked you a question about some things that might generate revenue in a bigger way faster to you. And, right away I could hear the lack of enthusiasm in your voice, but I love that you love talking to people specifically about here's what you can do. And that's really what we're going to dive into. So listeners, whether you're walking, you're lifting, or maybe you're commuting, maybe you're cooking dinner, I just want you to know We're very lucky to have Pete here. So let's dive in. We're talking, really, I wanted to have you here to talk about Ageless Intensity, your new book, which everybody, listeners, should have on their shelves in their library. And I think before we go diving into the book, talking about intensity, let's talk about the basics and what happens or can. I always like to phrase it that way. If we're not doing something about it, what can happen to the body as a natural process of aging?
Well, I think one of the analogies I use in the book, and I've used for years, Deborah, and I'm sure you probably do too as an educator, because most people can relate to that, is think of the body like a car. And there are many ways you can make that analogy. But if you do not exercise, if you have only a minimal amount of physical activity in your life, that's like leaving the car in the backyard and just letting it rust and fall apart. Because if you don't take care of a car, and let's use like a 1963 Mustang Fastback, I'm not a huge car guy, but I do appreciate the old American muscle cars. Well, a car that came out in 1963 is not quite 60 years old. And if you leave that thing in the backyard, the tires are going to rot, the engine oil is going to drain out, the engine's going to rust, the seats are going to fall apart. You will not be able to drive it. But if you maintain that car, if you get the regular oil change, if you get it tuned up, if you drive it regularly, if you get new tires when you need to, if you work on the brakes when you need to, then you can be driving that car now and it's 57 years old. Well, the body's the same way. Think of exercise, think of physical activity as regular maintenance that you would do on your car. If people are not exercising on a regular basis, they're just putting their car out in the backyard and just letting it fall apart, meaning their body. They're letting their body fall apart. Exercise, from what I've learned in my career, exercise is the means of allowing us to control how we age.
Love it. Love it. And don't we all want that? More control, right? Over something, especially right now in these times. It's like feeling like I have control over nothing.
Well, that's just it. Is we don't. I mean, look, we cannot unless. And one of the things I do in Ageless Intensity is I had fun with it, and I tried to make it very conversational by referencing 80s movies, because I figure everybody that my target demographic for the audience or for the book is primarily those Gen Xers and those baby boomers, younger baby boomers who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, being active every day. So I use the movie Back to the Future with Marty McFly, played by not Alex P. Keaton, that's his other character, played by Michael J. Fox. And we don't have time travel. We have not, where I go with Back to the Future is we have not yet invented time travel. So we cannot stop the forward progress of time. And therefore, our body, we don't know. Here's the thing, Deborah. Researchers aren't sure why we age. They don't understand. Nobody can really definitively point to why the human body has its effect, why the passage of time affects the human body the way that it does. But what we do know is that exercise can be one of the most powerful means for reducing the effects of time. So until we can invent the flux capacitor used to make time travel possible in Back to the Future, the only means we have for really controlling how the passage of time affects our body is getting the heart rate up and lifting heavy things.
Love it. Oh, you said two specific things right there. We're going to have to come back to those. But let's talk about the literal, like the how and the why. Is exercise so beneficial during the aging process?
Well, here's the thing. There's this word, it's a long word and it sounds super fancy, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, but it's called Mechanotransduction. And what Mechanotransduction means is when you apply a mechanical force to the body, you lift a weight, you move quickly through gravity, because when you move quickly, you increase the forces on your body. But when you apply mechanical force to your body, there's a cellular reaction where your body now is going to produce new chemicals to repair muscle tissue, and it's going to create new cells, new satellite cells to repair those damaged tissues. So exercise, through the process of mechanotransduction, exercise is your body's own recycling plant. So when you go out and you do hard, and this is the key thing. It's one thing to go out and walk and do moderate or low intensity exercise. Yes, that can improve your health. But from what the research is showing is that if you really want to use exercise to mitigate the effects of aging and slow it down, it needs to be higher intensity exercise, because that is what stimulates all these recycling processes and the recycling plants in your own internal body. That's what produces the new cells, is when you go out and you get out of breath and you pick up heavy stuff.
Okay, everybody, that was the mic drop for today. Our work here is done, except we're going to spend the rest of our time today emphasizing what Pete just said. And this is where, if you've been a walker forever, you love walking, and maybe you say, well, I've exercised for decades. I used to be a fitness instructor too. I know you, because you all are messaging me and tell me that. But if you're used to doing that steady state exercise that we did, still even really in the 90s, that was raise your heart rate, get it up. You're going to go at a certain pace and keep it that long, and then you're going to cool down. And every once in a while, you're going to reach to your carotid or your wrist, and you're going to make sure you're in your fat burning zone or your target heart rate zone. There's a new way, okay? And we're going to break it open and talk about it. Let's talk about specifically heavy lifting.
Well, and that's the thing, right? It is a lot of times as we get older, and one of the reasons why I wrote the book is there's a thing that came out from, I forget, some medical association or some association about 3 or 4 years ago that really recommended that people over 50 should not do heavy weight training. They should not do jumps. They should not do this and do that.
What?
And Deborah, yeah, exactly. And Deborah, you have to understand, and listeners should understand, I came of age playing men's club rugby. So I was in my early 20s and started playing club rugby with men in their 40s and even in their early 50s. So my influencers, some of my biggest influencers in fitness, were these men that were in their 40s and even early 50s. Mick Carey, who I played with in Boston, Mick was 50 years old when he started in the Rugby Super League, which was at the time the elite level of competition in the United States. So I saw guys getting older, men getting older, playing at high levels of sport. And I know that women, I've seen women over the years of 20 years of working in health clubs, I've seen women in their 50s and 60s capable of doing so much more than the textbooks tell us. And really, when we look at strength training, a couple things happen with strength training. One is we're activating the nervous system. The nervous system is what activates the type 2 motor units. They attach to the type 2 muscle fibers. Those are the muscle fibers which allow you to pick up heavy stuff and allow you to move explosively. Now, one important thing is that type 2 muscle fibers are fueled by carbohydrate, the carbohydrate that you eat. So if you go, and I love walking, and I'm going to I want to talk a little bit later about what a perfect week of exercise would look like. And I love walking, but walking uses primarily type 1 muscle fibers, which are fueled by fat and oxygen. When we strength train, when we lift heavy stuff, we're using primarily our type 2 muscle fibers, which can produce energy without oxygen using carbohydrate. That means our muscles become more efficient at using carbohydrate for fuel. Because one of the things that can happen to the body is we can maintain low intensity exercise as we age, but if we're not stimulating the process of converting carbohydrate to ATP, the chemical muscles use for energy, then we could still be at risk of developing type 2 diabetes. That is not unheard of. As somebody, well, I'm active all the time, I don't understand it. Mm-hmm. Well, if you're not lifting heavy stuff, you're not using the type 2 muscle fibers, which are much more efficient at carbohydrate metabolism. That's thing number one. And thing number two, it enhances your nervous system. So that way your reflexes work better, your reaction time, your strength, your ability to get out and do the things you enjoy. You don't need to ask that person to help you put your bag in the overhead bin on the plane, because you can pop that sucker up there yourself, which really, being strong, especially as we age, being strong gives us the freedom to go out and enjoy life and live it to the fullest.
Yeah, amen. I love that. And I love that you talked, fast twitch muscle fibers basically is what you're saying. And so it's important that everybody listening understands that you're made up of different muscle fibers, and we lose those fast twitch muscle fibers twice as fast as slow twitch as we age. And the reason is we're always doing slow twitch activities. We don't really have to work on those. I did national media tour in 2019, went from coast to coast into the Midwest talking about, do you have a fast twitch muscle fiber problem? And people are so rarely aware of this. But I love that you pointed out this is our reaction skills. And that is where, right now, we may not be worried about it. If you're in your 40s, you're probably not at all. But if you're in your 50s, your mid to late 50s, you start to realize, okay, wait a minute. I am not as graceful as I used to be. Like I'm tripping a little bit more, I'm catching myself. And if you have an aging parent and you're watching that, you're like seeing your future flash before your eyes. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So catching your toe on the rug, where winded rugs become a hazard, right? Because at some point for all of us, they could if we're not prepared, right? So right now is the time we're laying that foundation for how fit will we be even to manure our own household in 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know about you, but I'm going for triple digits.
Well, no, and it's funny because as I think about it, and listeners should understand that I had my kids late. I had my ex-wife and I we were fitness instructors, and for a while, my ex-wife was in the circuit of going to the Caribbean and teaching at various resorts in the Caribbean. So we were doing that in our late 20s and early 30s. We put off having kids because we were enjoying the freedom to travel. And it's ironic because now I look around and see my friends sending their kids off to college or kids getting out of college and they have the freedom now. But I say that because my kids are still in elementary school. I have two kids who are in second and fourth grade. And really, so I am motivated to learn more about this because I want to be able to enjoy my kids as we age. I want to be able to go out and do things. As my kids get older, I want to go mountain biking with my daughters. I went to a trampoline park with them not long ago and was able to jump on the trampolines with them and climb the obstacles and do all the fun things. And because it always makes me sad a little bit when I see parents sitting on the sidelines and their kids are having fun playing. And the parents are like, I'm like, why aren't you out there? You could be doing this too. Or even at sports practice, playing catch with the kids before or after practice and just having some fun. That's what I mean by having the freedom if you're fit and you maintain a high level of fitness with strength training and with high intensity interval training, then these things are a possibility. You don't have to sit on the sidelines of your life.
Love it. Yeah. And I think you just kind of tugged on everybody's heartstrings. I think, painting that picture of when your family travels again together, because we will, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But when you all travel to Colorado, you're not sitting there on the picnic table while the rest of the group hikes up and down and then comes back to get you. You're in there. You're actually doing it, enjoying it, loving it. And that's really what this is all about. Being able, I think, my definition of successful aging, being able to do the things you love with the people you love to do them with whenever you want to do them. That's successful aging.
Well, 100%. And that really, but you have to think that we haven't had this model before, Deborah. And this is really what we were just talking about this before you hit record, is that we have to realize that for listeners, we are now, and this is not hyperbole, but if you think back, more than in the late 1890s, the average human lifespan was about 48 or 50 years old. So if you're over the age of 50 and you lived 130 years ago, you're on borrowed time right now. And what's happened in the last 130 years? Well, we've improved public health. We've improved vaccinations. We've improved understanding how to fight disease and viruses. All that has improved over the last 130 years. So we've almost doubled our lifespan in that time. Well, now the fitness industry goes back to early 1970s. Before then, people didn't. I mean, think about it, Deborah. In the 1950s and the 1960s, exercise was not a recreational activity. We didn't see, June Cleaver didn't come home on Leave It to Beaver and say, "Hey guys, sorry, I was at spinning class. Dinner's not ready yet." You didn't see Carol Brady tell Mike Brady, "Sorry kids, I was doing my yoga and I didn't make dinner. We're ordering pizza tonight." That just wasn't part of the vernacular. That wasn't part of what we did. But starting in the 1970s, exercise became a recreational activity and a recreational pastime. So for your listeners out there, Deborah, who are in their 50s and 60s and who've had a gym membership for the last 30 or 40 years since the 1980s. Congratulations, because you really are we are now in the fittest. The older adults are now the fittest they've ever been in history. And research is only starting to understand why people in their 60s and 70s and beyond are able to do triathlons. I spoke with a doctor last year who usually does 2 or 3 full-length Ironman triathlons a year, and he was 73 years old. He doesn't slow down, but he just knows how to train smarter. So that's really what I've realized in the last number of years is we are redefining how we view how we view aging. We're redefining how we view aging, and exercise is probably the most critical means of that right now.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you've just said, the 73-year-old who, does 2 to 3 Ironman. That reminds me that it's such a culture. So whoever you are and you're listening, so you're within earshot, what you really want to do is look around you. And if you are drawn to this and optimal aging, and you want to figure out what is it, what does it mean to you, what does it look like for you, or what does it look like just to take a step closer to getting to how you want to age, you need to be surrounded by people who are thinking the same way, doing the same activities, not necessarily letting their age limit them. Because I know when I talk to my mom, I'm the youngest of 4, so birth order has something to do with this, right? But my mom's 95 because of that. And, I remember asking her on a Facebook Live, and no less, I said, did you ever think about exercising when you were young, or do you regret? She said, no, are you kidding me? And I said, I'm going to have to edit this out. But she said, we did chores. We didn't need to exercise. I mean, we did chores. And that's why I think there's this gap. We haven't had a role model. We're being the role model. We're changing the whole model by being it. But my parents, were not that for me. They weren't the role model. In fact, when I changed my major from graphic design, which they understood, to exercise science and sports and exercise psychology, they were like, what's your major again? Like, and what are you going to do with that? They had no idea. And they thought I was nuts. So the real circle here is put yourself around people who are doing what you want to do or doing what you're doing. The triathlon community is such a great example. There are 70-year-olds starting triathlon, doing it for the first time.
No, and that's why I referenced that being in the rugby community. I was 22 or 23 years old playing with the Santa Monica Rugby Club in Los Angeles. And we had a guy come on the field. He had just turned 71 or 72, and he was an old boy, and obviously an old boy. But in rugby, you have tournaments where you can play over 35 teams, over 45 teams, over 55 teams. I think they cap it at over 55. But Bruce came on the field, and he was wearing special colored shorts, meaning you didn't tackle him. All you had to do was tag him, and he had to turn the ball over. So they do adjust for that. He's not out there at 71 years old tackling with everybody. But he came on the pitch. He played 10 minutes because he said, I wanted to play rugby in every decade of my life. I was 22, 23 years old. I forget exactly how old I was when I saw that. But I can't tell you how much that motivated me to be like, dang it, this is what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to do that when I'm that age. And now that I'm here in California, I mean, one of the reasons I love living in the San Diego area, Carlsbad is North County, San Diego, is if I go down to the beach, Deborah, I see people with gray hair. I'm not just talking gray. They're probably bald up top. They have gray chest hair when they take their wetsuits off. But these guys are out there surfing. Men and women are out there doing this, and they're being active at any age. It really is. It's motivating to see. I have this woman, I'm teaching at a YMCA now, and I have this woman who's in her late 50s, and she still plays beach volleyball 3 or 4 times a week. That is the type of, you're absolutely right. What is it? Your vibe attracts your tribe, and vice versa. You can find people at any age being active. You just have to look in the right places.
that. Okay, this is what everybody's been waiting for. So we're going to talk about the most effective types of workouts that listeners should be doing as they age. Well, and let me say that. So I hate to should on anyone, but the wisest decisions to make with your exercise time and your energy if you wanted to age optimally. Go.
Well, no, and I love that, right? I try to classify exercise into three different categories, into three different buckets. One, you have your force production exercise, which is strength and power training. And strength is just is putting out muscular force. When you look at physics, force is mass times acceleration. So muscles generate force. You can either lift something heavy. So with a force production workout, you either lift something heavy or you move explosively. You can throw medicine balls. You can swing kettlebells. You can do jumps. But it's probably 2 or 3 workouts a week should be focused on heavy force production, either strength training or power training. So 2 or 3 workouts a week of force production. Then you have metabolic conditioning. And I'm sure most of your listeners know this is cardio. But I always joke the fact that if you're breathing, Deborah, you're doing cardio. And when we talk about exercise, and I'm sure, you know this, but for listeners, this is where I get a little geeky. For exercise, we have different types of ways that our body metabolizes energy. We have the long, steady state way to do it, or we have the immediate high intensity way to do it. So metabolic conditioning should be 2 to 3 workouts a week, with at least 1 or 2 of those workouts being high intensity interval training, being HIIT training, but not a high volume. The research is showing that between 4 and 10 minutes of high intensity is all that's necessary. So listeners don't need to roll their eyes and go, oh my God, I don't want to do a 45-minute HIIT class. No, you don't have to do that, but you should be doing between 4 to 10 minutes of HIIT training, high intensity interval training, once or twice a week to use your engine efficiently. So we have 2 or 3 days a week of force production, 2 or 3 days a week of metabolic conditioning, and then 2 or 3 days a week of just low intensity body weight movement. That could be like a dance class. That could be a yoga class. That could be just a body weight exercise workout on a TRX or some other type of equipment or a stability ball, just moving your own body through space. Because the difference is when you lift something heavy, you're usually only going in one plane of motion. You're usually just going up and down. So your muscles are getting stronger. But when you move through space, if you're doing yoga, if you're doing like a light medicine ball workout, or you're doing TRX, which is challenging you in multiple planes of motion, you're working on the connective tissue between all the muscle fibers. So a heavy force production day is for the muscle fibers. The light, low intensity body weight day is for your connective tissue. And listeners might be hearing me say, well, 2 or 3 days a week. They're not 9 days in a week. I'm fully well aware of that. But I want to give people options for it's all, as we get older, is based on recovery. So those weeks when life gets busy and you get overscheduled at work, or you got so many activities you have to get to, well, maybe you only get 1 or 2 high intensity workouts in the gym that week. But maybe you can do 2 or 3 lower intensity workouts. And then on another week, when life is more under control and you're feeling great, you're eating well, you're sleeping awesome, now you can upregulate and try to go an extra hard workout or 2. But that's one of the big things I talk about in the book, is how to understand when to apply the high intensity exercise. Because the one thing, and I think you can agree on this, is we've done a very good job of communicating that high intensity exercise is beneficial. But what we have not done a great job at is saying, hey, only a little bit is all you need to do. And that's what study after study shows. There's one great study I like to reference. They had 3 different groups. 2 of the groups did 12 minutes of training a week. That's what they did, 12 minutes of exercise a week. And the other group did 90 minutes of exercise a week. But the 2 groups were high intensity interval training. One group did body weight exercises only. The other group did 12 minutes of high intensity interval training on a treadmill. That's 12 minutes per week, 3 4-minute workouts. And both the 12-minute groups got better results than the 90-minute group of doing 30 minutes at a time on a treadmill. So it really is, if you apply it the right way at the right time, that's what really is critical about using high intensity exercise, especially as we go through the aging process. And that's really, I try to paint that picture in the book so people can say, all right, I get it. I have a busy week. Maybe I get 1 hard workout in and I do 2 or 3 low intensity workouts. Weeks are a little bit more under my control. I'm not as scheduled. I have more time. I'm eating better. I'm feeling great. Oh, I'm going to crank it up this week. and do a couple extra hard workouts. It's all about, I try to get people thinking long term, not just go out and crush yourself today, because that's not that effective in the long run. But how do you structure a long term program so that you, as you alluded to, you can achieve successful aging?
Love it. And so very applicable to our listeners. So our listeners are, perimenopause, kind of right there at menopause, although that's a blip on the schedule. I look at late stage perimenopause, early stage postmenopause as a special menopause name, and then just postmenopause. They're right there. And one of the most important things for them to think about is just what you've tapped into. High intensity is very important, and yet a small amount of it with an equal opportunity for adequate recovery. So thinking, work hard, but also recover hard, give that its credit. And it's important for women who are going through hormonal changes, especially during that major roller coaster, because adrenal dysfunction is a real thing for women, more so than men in midlife. So making sure that you are, following that type of schedule and not just doing the feels like or going for but I want to lose this weight. So I need to make sure that I get this exercise no matter what my schedule is about. You don't want to override that, because actually the additional stressors that you may be facing during a really busy week might deem that less exercise or lighter exercise the thing that actually helps you release the weight, specifically the fat weight.
Yeah, and that's what really I love. You said stress, and that's what I think a lot of people, a lot of the consumers, even fitness professionals, we forget the fact that exercise is stress on the body. That's what it is. And when we exercise, we're imposing physical stress on the body. So there needs to be a balance. You can't have all one without the other. And I think one of the greatest things that's happened in the last 10 years, probably more in the last 5 years, is we've seen this understanding that the magazines, the fitness magazines out there, the popular media is now understanding the role of recovery. And we're just now kicking off the football season. And the reason why somebody like Tom Brady is able to play football in the NFL at 44 years old, and why LeBron James is able to play at a high level of basketball in his late 30s is these guys understand that you need to maintain your fitness level throughout. They have never stopped. They've never stopped training. Each of them famously spends hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on their fitness routines and chefs and nutritionists, which not everybody has that resource, but you can look at what they do, and both of them talk about their recovery, whether it's their sleep habits, whether it's infrared sauna, whether it's getting massage, all those things. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, Deborah, and that I love about this message about recovery is self-care. So I talk about high intensity workouts being critical for this, but so is that long walk. I mean, one of my favorite workouts every week is I go for a long walk. Sometimes I go hiking in some trails, or other times I just walk around the neighborhood. But I actually, that long walk, wherever I do it, is one of my favorite workouts, because I'm not overstressing the body. I'm not getting out of breath. I'm not challenging myself. So I want people to understand that for optimal aging, yes, we do need to challenge ourselves sometimes, but we also need to recognize and listen to our body, that sometimes on those days when we don't feel like going hard, give yourself permission to take that day off and just go for a walk, or maybe do a meditation, or maybe do an online yoga class, or take a yoga class, but do something of where you're doing something active, but that really is more taking care of yourself, because recovery is self-care.
I really love that. It's funny that that pandemic reconnected me with walking too. I think it was, at first it was like a way to get outside and at least wave to other humans from across the street, right? I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm alone. I live alone. My four-legged friend was not really much comfort, and but I realized that's happened like 3 other times in my life, that walking is actually how I started getting into fitness, and recovery from a back injury. And then I remember every time how much I love this. but we let our minds and maybe social media memes take over and think, oh no, I should be doing far more. And so thanks for reminding me of,
Well, real quick, but I didn't, when we first went into quarantine in the spring of 2020, I was doing a couple of media interviews about how to stay active at home. And one of the points I made was there's a good percentage of people out there. We have those people out there, Deborah, who don't do much exercise, but there's kind of like an inverse bell curve. If you look at it, and a friend of mine, my buddy Graham, said this years ago. So it's not my idea, but he pointed it out. And I think he's very accurate with that, is we have this inverse bell curve where you have a lot of people on one side of the scale don't do much exercise. But there we have on the other side of the scale, there are a lot of people there that exercise too much, that are in the gym 7 days a week. Sometimes they go twice a week. And they're always doing high intensity exercise, yet wondering why they don't get results because they're overtraining. Well, I think one of the best things about slowing down a little bit during COVID was it was a period of forced recovery where you can access the gym. That's actually not a bad thing for you, to go out and do some walks or do some body weight exercises at home. That actually is better for your body in the long run because you're de-stressing, you're deloading the body or unloading the body as long as you keep moving it. So I just really think we got to look at it from a physiological standpoint. And as much stress as there was, it was also not a bad time. That's not the time we need to be loading your body up with exercise stress.
So true. Love that. Okay. Pete, so the new book I know is at Amazon.com. I'm going to put that link in the show notes today. But while we have you, two things. One, where can listeners get more Pete McCall?
I don't know if they'd want that, but thank you. No, I do. I appreciate that opportunity because I do the All About Fitness podcast, and I love what you do with Flipping 50 because you're speaking to a very specific audience. And what I try to do for listeners, and what I try to do on my podcast, is kind of have these geeky conversations. There's so many fitness podcasts out there. They're about, bro, you got to get big, you got to look swole, you got to do this and that. And I do none of that. I try to have an elevated conversation. You're going to be one of my next guests on there, Deborah. We've already recorded that interview, and you can share with your listeners that you'll be on upcoming episode. But I try to have an elevated discussion about fitness so that we can all understand how to use fitness and exercise to enhance our quality of life. So it's all about fitness. I have the All About Fitness podcast YouTube channel, the All About Fitness podcast Instagram feed, where the information I put out, all I'm trying to do is just help us learn how to use exercise to really stay on top of and manage the aging process. And then finally, my blog is my name, PeteMcCallFitness.com. And I'm trying to put up about 2 to 4 blog pieces a month. And I try to put out 1 or 2. I need to up this a little bit, just high quality emails, just to let people know that how they can use exercise to really just have fun and manage the aging process.
Fantastic. Great resources, listeners. And I'm going to throw this out as an aside. So Pete is here clearly. So I knew that he would bring value to you and to me. And yet so many of you are often asking, who's the male version of Flipping 50? And I don't know that I've convinced Pete he needs to do that yet, but a male voice is right here. And he is highly credible and very personable, and he's not just a pretty face. So you can bring your male partners, your friends, your brothers, your colleagues right here. Great. Another resource for you and another one to share. Pete, thanks so much for being here.
Deborah, thank you so much for having me on. And listeners, thank you for letting me share some of your time today. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, listener, now it's your turn. If there's a question that I should have asked Pete, something that you wished I would have asked, you can leave that below the show notes today at flipping50.com/ageless intensity. And what are you waiting for? Let's start Flipping 50 today.